Hey, this is Reginald Perryman with ReggiusRealEstate.com. So today I want to talk to you about cash for keys versus evictions. So we all know currently in the market that we're in and what's going on with the courts, depending on what city and what state your properties are in, you are experiencing delays with evicting your tenants. Well, there's another option out there, and I would recommend talking to an attorney. Basically, what cash for keys is, you are negotiating a set amount to pay the occupant or the tenant to vacate on a specific date. So, for example, you want the tenants out in 30 days, you pay them upon vacating the property a certain dollar amount, and that amount is negotiated, and you and the tenant get to decide what's fair. So, here are some of the benefits of cash for keys. One is you get to decide, or you and the tenant get to decide, and have some control over the actual vacancy date. Whereas if you go to court, you have to go through the process of filing the paperwork, getting a hearing date from the court, and the judge may still give the tenant more time to vacate. Well, that doesn't benefit the tenant either in a situation where now that you filed for eviction, that's going to show up on their record and make it even more difficult for the tenant to find a new place to stay or to rent. So, cash for keys is kind of a benefit to both parties, depending on if they can come to an agreement and if both parties are thinking clearly. The reason most property owners or landlords don't want to do cash for keys, sometimes I have to admit, it's all about ego. I'm not paying my tenant to move. Why would I do that? Well, technically, you're always paying your tenant to move in a eviction situation. And what I mean by that, it's going to cost you. So let's take an example here in the Detroit area. Well, Detroit requires you to have a dumpster at the property. Let's say the dumpster costs you anywhere from $300 to $500, right? The bailiff shows up. If there's no dumpster there, the bailiff is not going to complete that eviction. And speaking of bailiff, so we already $300 to $500 for the dumpster, right? Now, the bailiff costs can be anywhere from $600 and up. So you have to add that on. So let's just say on average the bailiff is $800 and you have $400 for the dumpster. You're at $1,200. Now, when the bailiff is done and eviction is complete, the bailiffs typically only remove furniture and the larger items. So as far as cleanup, you still have to go in and do some type of debris removal, right? So let's talk about evictions. Evictions, you have time. Now you can, depending on your state and city, you can file a judgment to go after the tenant for the back rent. So that's an advantage of doing an eviction versus cash for keys. So those are some things you have to talk to your attorney about. Now, back to the cash for keys versus the eviction process. Now, let's say you go through the process of doing the eviction, and you're going to spend $1,200 to $1,500 minimum on average. Well, you can just offer the tenant $1,000 or $1,500 to vacate on or before a certain date. Never pay the tenant in advance. I wouldn't recommend that. But they, upon them vacating, you can pay that tenant. I wouldn't pay necessarily give them cash money. I would give them a check, certified check, or a company check, or whatever you're comfortable with. Again, talk to your attorney because laws vary per state and per city and things of that nature. Also, have the tenant sign a document stating that they agreed to vacate on or before a certain date. In addition to that, always include a clause or some verbiage in this agreement regarding the condition of the property. So, if you go through an eviction process, we all know some tenants actually tear up properties. Well, if you do cash for keys, hey, by the way, when you vacate, I need the property broom clean and free of debris. When you do an eviction, you're not getting that. The bailiff is just tossing out furniture, appliances that are the tenants and things of that nature, but there's no cleanup. You can ask the tenant to vacate and leave the property broom clean and free of any debris, meaning no extra bags, furniture, and things of that nature. So again, there's a little bit more control, and then there's a little bit um, more negotiations that can be done between you and the tenant. Now, the downside to cash for keys is if you've already started the eviction process, sometimes depending on the city and state, offering cash for keys may be frowned upon if you have to go to court. It all varies, but cash for keys is most likely a better option. I know it hurts to say, why should I? It hurts to pay the tenant to vacate, right? Why should I give them $1,000 and they haven't paid me in 3 or 4 months, right? I get it, but if you are evicting a tenant, you are paying for that tenant to leave anyway. Why not have some control over when they leave and how they leave? Now, here's the biggest, I would say, the biggest benefit to cash for keys if you are planning on putting this home on the market before the tenant vacates. You can have an agreement. Again, talk to your attorney. I'm just basing this off of experience on what I've seen good investors do over the years. Let's say the house is occupied, you have a non-paying tenant or squatter. You can say, we'll offer cash for keys for you to vacate on or before this date. You have a set amount, you have a set date. But in the meantime, you need to sell the property, right? You can have an agreement that the tenant will allow showings on specific dates and times to allow you to sell the property in the process. So that's going to be more attractive to a buyer because you have a set deadline. Now, there's a chance the person won't vacate by the date, right? You can give them an extension if you choose to, or you can start the eviction process at that time, right? But you can have them agree to certain days and times for showing the properties. This will allow you to avoid the issues of tenants who are already not paying, they're disgruntled about being evicted, and they're not going to cooperate with showings. Trust me. But if you have an agreement in writing that they will perform under the conditions of this contract, now you have set days and times for showings, you have a set vacate date. Now, is that 100% foolproof? Not at all. But if they need money to relocate, the eviction is coming anyway, whether you do cash for keys or you go through the courts. So if the tenants can understand that, cash for keys is probably going to be a better option for both parties. This is Reginald Perryman with ReggiusRealEstate.com.